what are abusers doing for victims to stay so long? Abusers are often so charming, so charismatic. They really can be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They can be such villainous, poisonous, vile creatures, but then they can turn around and be the most charming beings and gaslight you into thinking, wow, how did this person behave this way? That was a temporary lapse of character. That was certainly not a consistent trait of them.
Welcome to another episode of Cosmic Chats. Today, we have the delightful Kimberly Gold, who is not only a speaker that goes around talking about overcoming childhood trauma, she dabbles with comedy. And today, she's going to talk about how do you break the gaslighting cycle. So how would you describe the taste of a banana to someone who's never eaten one?
The taste of a banana to someone who's never eaten one. Well, first, can I ask, what is their able status? Are they able to see and feel the banana and smell the banana?
Whatever you want the answer to be.
Okay, well, they definitely can do all of that. So I would first tell them that it smells very sweet, that it smells very tropical. It is.
How do you smell tropical?
You smell tropical like. That's a great question. How do you smell tropical? You smell like pineapples and mangoes and strawberries. Are strawberries even tropical? I don't think so, but they are now.
So, but a lot of like fruity, so-called tropical drink. Tropical would be any alcoholic drink that has an umbrella in it.
Correct. And can be served in a coconut or a pineapple. And I would say a banana is very light tasting. It meshes well with others.
So do you like bananas and tropical tastes?
I do, actually. I would say that even though I was born on a peninsula, the peninsula of Korea, because we can't go north just yet, it was like I was born on an island. So I was born on an island. So I think that I am an islander by heart, by spirit, and I love all things tropical and island.
So did you have your first existential life crisis when you were in Korea?
Yes, I was born.
That would be a reflection looking back. But when did you have a moment? And this often happens in childhood. People sort of bypass this reality. There's a moment in childhood where the perception of the world goes, right? And you think, hang on, maybe adults don't know what they're doing, or this doesn't make sense. Do you remember having that type of moment as a kid?
Oh, absolutely. And I speak very openly about this to, quite frankly, anyone who will listen, because I think that silence has been weaponized. And I believe that we need to speak about our lived experiences because so many of them are shared experiences. And when we speak about them, we understand that, man, I'm not the only one going through this. There's other people, thousands, if not millions, if not billions of people who have been through the same trauma, the same pain point. And for me, I was about 5 years old when my stepfather came into my life. And my stepfather was a monster who terrorized me for decades. And I knew that something was not right, even though I was so young, because, you know, as a young child, you really don't know what right and wrong is. But I think there is something inside of you that gives you some kind of compass that says, this just doesn't feel right in my spirit. And when I was that young, his favorite way to punish me was to have me crawl on all fours like a pig. And if I needed to communicate, to oink like a pig. And the point was to let me know that I was less than human. And that was awful. I can't imagine doing that to an adult, let alone a 4-year-old child. And the second, third, fourth order effects of that kind of punishment and more, it took a long time to heal from, Paula.
So you would say that silence is a weapon because you didn't talk about it or have anyone to talk to about it?
Absolutely. I think that when you don't talk about it, one, you just don't know that other people are going through it. So you believe that it's an isolated event. And when you are silenced by it, you give power to the abuser, because the abuser now has the power in knowing that no one else knows what the abuser is doing. So there's nothing that can be done about it. You're just suffering in silence. So silence is
Sorry.
weaponized.
So this was in Korea or you were in the States then?
I was actually in the States at this time.
Okay. So that was
I was,
American stepfather?
no, he was actually Korean. My parents, my mother is Korean, my father's Black American. And my parents split up when I was very, very young, but my mother remarried a Korean man in the States. And I had a Korean stepfather, Korean mother, my Korean maternal grandparents and great grandmother lived with me. And I had two siblings that came after me. So in my family dynamic, it was definitely like I was a little chocolate drop there. And it was definitely like one of these is not like the other.
Do you think that was, and am I correct when your stepfather was not African American or have any drop color in him? He was Korean?
He was 100% Korean.
Okay. Do you think that was a big factor for you being outcast?
Oh, no, I think he was an equal opportunity abuser. He abused. He, everyone in my family was a victim. When I got older, I realized that my brothers were victims. My mother was a victim. My grandparents were a victim. My cousins would visit us every summer. They were victims. Anyone that was close to this man, anyone that dared to love this man was a victim.
And so why do you think it was that your mother stayed with him so long?
Because victims stay with what we know. We stay with abuse. We stay with the comfort that is familiar. And also, I think that we don't understand. We ask that question often, like, why do victims stay with abusers for so long? And sometimes I really think we should reframe the question, Paula. What are abusers doing for victims to stay so long? Abusers are often so charming, so charismatic. They really can be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They can be such villainous, poisonous, vile creatures, but then they can turn around and be the most charming beings and gaslight you into thinking, wow, how did this person behave this way? That was a temporary lapse of character. That was certainly not a consistent trait of them. And you stay and you stay and you stay. And fortunately, some of us get out, and unfortunately, some of us never do.
So let's just go back and some of the stuff that you said. So reaffirming your definition of gaslighting.
My definition of gaslighting would be causing the other party to second guess everything that they know. So to the point where they know nothing, that they are completely codependent on this person, this source for their opinions, their validation, their everything. And I think you so brilliantly stated in one of your previous episodes that where there is codependency, there is abuse.
Absolutely.
So I think that gaslighting is a situation where you create codependency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the episode Codependency, wherever there is codependency, excuse me, there it opens up channels for abuse. And the reason why I ask is because quite often we are in a society where still in 2022, there is not equal wage for women and men in the United States of America. And that's considered one of the forefront most forward-thinking nations in the world. And when there is we talk about financially, a lot of reason why one party will stay with another is because of financial codependency, right? So we have individuals like yourself now moving out of a situation, wanting to create a situation in your life that is not that way. But that imprint is there very deeply within your consciousness when we are children, when we are very young, memories we aren't even aware of. That is imprinted, right? And it is imprinted ideally to protect the individual from any remnant of this happening again, to set off, fight or flight responses. However, what often can happen is the fight or flight response kicks up early. The individual doesn't know that they're doing it. It's just like a pattern. And they go back to exactly what you said, go back to what you know. So they begin to recreate the same situation over and over again. So I'll use a broad example, not based on any particular person. One of the people wanted to leave England was they wanted freedom of religion and state, right? Let's get free of it. And then came over to America. And the majority of elections, the reason why things change majority-wise is based on the fact that people want to be in a state where their religion is honored. And that is marrying religion and state, not freedom of it. So what's been recreated is the same thing that initially people wanted to run from.
Funny how history repeats itself, isn't it?
But that's why it repeats itself, because the consciousness of the individuals, which eventually creates the collective, has not gone and retrained what we call, in India, they use a Sanskrit term, which I think is more appropriate than the English translation, samskara. It's an imprint that's in the consciousness, which is beyond memory. So a memory can be something that happens, I'll just say, an emotional response or a mental recollection. The emotional response stays within that nervous system and is imprinted far more deeply than the mental response. So let's say someone's looking at pictures of them, I don't know, maybe graduation or a wedding day. We'll say wedding, this is supposed to be the most happy day of the world. And when they look at a picture, the memory will come back if they have an emotional response to when that photo was taken. Right? If it could be, oh, I don't look good. But if it was you are fighting with the photographer all day, and that was the final pinnacle, and the photographer highlights an image of you going like this, right? You're like, God, everyone else looks so good in that picture, and I'm the bride. Like, that's what's going to be remembered, because there's an emotional response, right? And that emotional response kicks the fight or flight. And these memories are buried very deeply, and they cannot be removed just by a conversation. Right, the actual the help with the therapy and talking out loud is very good for the mind to be able to correct a situation. But the actual physiology, the consciousness of an individual to change that fight or flight response is far deeper than simply understanding it logically. If that was the case, we would not have rooms filled with people who get off of opiates or alcohol or addiction for years and then go back to it, right? The actual chemical addiction has dissipated. It is a mental need for a relief of a deep, deep samskara with that. So based on that information, what does help changing that physiology are practices like meditation that help the nervous system go in. And if anyone's curious about what aware meditation is, there's a little image back there of our ebook Vedic meditation stories. And it's the only publication globally that has true stories from people who learned it and what happened. It's all in their words. It's not edited. So don't kill me for the syntax, or just my own, because it's awful. But that's, partially being dyslexic, that we want to hear their voice. And they talk about how they didn't think that closing their eyes and doing a non-directive meditation practice could actually bring about these results. And there's huge results, especially with PTSD, which is very strong within the military, because it's that emotional trigger response that really needs to be addressed, right? That's what needs to be addressed. Mentally understanding it then makes a difference when we really get to that emotional part of the brain, the reptilian brain, as Deepak Chopra likes to talk about, right? That's the mommy, I want to go to the store now, kind of like, oh, this child has this will, right? If you have a daughter, this will is strong, right? You're like, it's just like, we have the ice cream at home. No, I want it on that cone. We have cones at home. No, it has to be that cone, right? It is so fantastic to be able to observe that pure will, that pure, like, I will not survive unless you give me this. And this is why, and I had a nice conversation with my almost 13-year-old niece, explaining why her younger sister acts that way, because to her, it's life or death, right? And I said, when you were that age, it was the same way. But now you're almost 13, you can see it's not really life or death that's happening, but her nervous system of her younger sister, it is. Right. And she was able to have a moment of, I never thought of it like that. And then she was able to, this was fast, remember when she would have a reaction, a very specific one that was very big, and why it happened. And that kind of realization isn't simply talking about things. She was having a connection to the emotional response. And when there is healing from that place, then the consciousness can shift, right? And that's when habits can start to break. So on your path, what did you do? Hey, speaking of which, right? So what did you do to allow yourself to actually have the awakening enough to address, to try to peel back what was beginning to have you repeat it, right? Because those who are abused often repeat it back.
Absolutely. And I for sure repeated the cycle myself. I did enter into an abusive marriage, and it took me a while to get out of that marriage. And it took me a while to even heal from that. And it took therapy to understand that I had this deeply imprinted childhood trauma that was manifesting itself in my everyday adult life.
So let me ask you this. I'm going to interrupt real quick. So the therapy, there was a moment in the therapy, or there's a moment before which caused you to go to therapy, in your gut, in your soul, that was like, this has got to change, right? So there's how many times are people like, I'm going to do a new exercise program, I'm going to eat better, and you do a few weeks, but it's not sustainable, right?
Right.
The one time it's sustainable, and we see this with all people all over. I have a friend who lost 50 pounds during the whole COVID. Everybody else
Good for her.
30.
Good for her.
But it was a huge shift, and everyone's like, whoa. And she did it very, and I'm going to say it, sanely, right? She just had accountability because she realized she was not eating properly. And she just accounted for it. She wrote it down. That's all she did, and had a support group. No rules or what you could and couldn't eat. You had this amount that you were going to intake, right? But she did it over a year, right? That requires something within the soul, within the consciousness, to flip the switch and stay the course. Was it before you got to therapy, or was there a moment in the therapy that you realized, whoa, that's it, that's hitting the nail on the head, I'm going to continue?
It was definitely in therapy. So growing up, although I knew something wasn't right, and I knew that even in my marriage, something wasn't right, I did this thing which I like to call the trauma Olympics, where we compare our traumas to everyone else. And I'm an avid reader, and I would read all these stories of abuse and trauma. And I would say, well, yes, I know that it wasn't right. And I do believe that I was abused, but I wasn't abused like that. And as my ex-husband would say, it's not like I beat you. Like I didn't beat you. I didn't beat your ASS. And I had this thought process, this narrative in my head all the time. And when I was in therapy, I received the validation from the therapist that said, Kimberly, stop. Stop comparing your pain points to other people. Stop comparing your trauma to other people. This is your lived experience, and it was traumatic for you. And it was trauma. You lived through a very terrible experience. And that was the moment that I realized, wow, okay, I can move on because I am now accepting that this happened to me.
Right. And no, it came through a face, a voice that whatever inside of you was willing to listen and hear that. Because there may have been other people, and I say this not really for you, but for other people who are listening. How many times has someone said, oh, I'll just use the losing weight example from my friend. Oh, yeah, she might say, I want to do it. Or people have said, oh, you need to watch it. You need to watch it, right? And it doesn't go in because the listener doesn't, the key is on the inside. The key to the soul is on the inside, right? And there could be people saying things all around, but it's like that one good teacher. It's the way they say it. It's the form that they're in that allows the person to unlock that door. So you had a part in your listening that you were ready, and that you then said, yeah, it doesn't matter if I am not as bad as this person, right? It only
Absolutely.
matters where I'm at. And that's actually the same on the other side of it, of people who, drink too much or use substances. Oh, I'm not as bad as they are. They're out every
Right.
night. I
Right.
just do it on the weekend and create havoc and have no friends as a result. Or, oh, I don't go out. I just drink and dial. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that it's the same way. It's the comparisons kill, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I also have to say, I think a big part of it was my therapist was a woman and a woman of color. And I think that connection was a big part of it because I felt like I was in a space where there was some understanding, there was shared experience. And that was that allowed me to be more vulnerable than I had been in the past with other people. And I will be completely honest, in the past where I had interactions with licensed therapists, whether even if it wasn't in a clinical setting, I was always very guarded. And I didn't feel that I could be my authentic self, that I could be that vulnerable. But when I had the experience to chat with a therapist who was a woman and a person of color, I was able to let my wall down. And that was a big breakthrough. And for that reason, I'm a big advocate. I hope that more people with all kinds of backgrounds go into the field of therapy and other types of healing, such as meditation and yoga, et cetera, because I think that will open up the gateway for so many other people who historically have not used these methods of healing.
Well said. And the relatability, we'll just wrap it up with relatability is imperative when it comes to another person being able to hear. And that's part of what we're doing here with Cosmic Chats, that maybe one of you is watching and now has a relatability to Kimberly you didn't have before, or someone might have clicked on the thumbnail because of how you look like, right? Which is why miracles are defined as something that the normality of human consciousness cannot comprehend. That's also what weird is, right? That they can't explain they have a connection now. Something might have rippled in someone else's consciousness, and that is part of what we're doing here in Cosmic Chats, because every person, we walk down a street, the strangers you don't know, someone is doing something miraculous. Someone is breaking a chain from a path before, and we are all doing wonderful, groundbreaking steps to shift consciousness. And having moments like this to watch other people who are doing it are inspiring and uplift our heart. And when the heart starts to become open, we can then really listen to what the soul is telling us, right? And the soul makes no sense to the brain, no sense unless one has listened to it, done an action, and the results have come tenfold for us to feel more comfortable in our body. And we're not talking about financial results. It's sort of like, I don't know why I turned left instead of right. And there was my friend whose car had broken down on the road, and I stayed with them for 20 minutes. Like, that fills the soul, because there was an intuition of, doesn't make any sense to turn left. And then the experience that one has helped another person who knows what could have happened if there wasn't two people there waiting on the side of the road. That deep sense of purpose, right? That deep sense of purpose. So you've enjoyed, Kimberly. Please pop a comment down there. We really appreciate all comments. Please subscribe, like, and even share this particular Cosmic Chat. And if you have questions, you can always write a note. We have all of our locations down there in the box. We also have the link to the ebook that 100% of those profits go to the nonprofit. No money goes to anyone for that. And with that, I really want to thank you, Kimberly, for being so open on this Cosmic Chat.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Likewise.